points I want you to recognize here that is instructive to you and I as we approach the Word of God. The first one is this. Notice the phrase that Simeon says here, that he is now ready to depart in peace. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to depart in peace? My hope and my prayer is that you depart from this place in a little while in peace. My desire is not that all the world's wars stop. That's not going to happen. The Bible tells us that. But the idea that Simeon is presenting here is that he can now die. That's usually not the first thing that someone hopes for. It's usually not what one says, hey, I have had this event happen, now I can go die. Usually most of us are trying to avoid whatever that event would be, if that was what the last thing was going to happen before we go and die. But Simeon here is recognizing a tremendous peace. We speak about peace in that particular way. Simeon even has a desire, saying, I have hoped for this event. I've hoped for this encounter with the Messiah. And now it has happened, and he has a release in his life where he can say, now I recognize this is God's fulfillment in what he has promised to me. This is Simeon's desire to say, I have experienced salvation. He even uses that phrase here that I have seen God's salvation. This is the promise of the Messiah. He has now come. Now, the crucifixion hasn't happened. There's going to be some 30 years from this event that we read in Luke 2 until Jesus even begins his ministry, somewhere around 30 years old. And he's going to preach for some 3 years, training his disciples before the crucifixion happens. You and I, when we talk about salvation, we point back to the crucifixion and we say, here was Jesus, that one who lived a perfect life, born of a virgin, and died for my sin, and rose again the third day so that I might have the forgiveness of sin and the example to me of the resurrection that God has promised to me also. And all of that is tied up in the very understanding of Simeon as he said, now I have seen this. Although the events had not happened yet, he knew the promise that he had been given was fulfilled. Therefore, he could trust God for whatever else God had promised about the fulfillment of salvation for mankind. And we see that he has seen that. The death was not something that Simeon feared. We would hear in parallel the words of Paul that says, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. And we don't have that kind of terminology much in our day and time. The Bible's not talking about depressed people who are looking just to escape this life so they can have some better kind of life. Instead, what we find is people who have lived for a purpose and a design by God, who said, God has given me this life. It is precious. I should do nothing to shorten my life so that I might be used of God to fulfill all the purposes that He has for my life. Then when God says it's time for you to come home, you are joyous to say, I am ready because I have peace with God, because I have put my faith and my trust in Jesus Christ alone for my salvation.